Okay, so in this demo, we are going to be looking at how to get side-by-side images in Photoshop, which will be really useful for your famous portraits project that you're working on right now, as well as your You versus Google project coming up around the corner, and of course the diptych project, which will have you put together images as diptychs, triptychs, or in some other kind of format that you determine. But for today, we're going to look at putting images side by side in Photoshop. And what I've done is pulled up two images. First is a screenshot, which I took from Google Street View of East Lower Wacker Drive here in Chicago. And then I also have pulled up a JPEG that I took on my camera of the same spot. So very much in the style of your You versus Google project. Of course, if you're working through your famous portraits, this is also going to hopefully become very useful for you. So let's go ahead and move forward by opening Photoshop. And what I'm going to do is open both of these images simultaneously. So I'm hitting open in Photoshop and I'm going to find my You versus Google example pictures, and that has both my screenshot as well as the image here, and that should open them up in their own separate tabs, which will be very useful. And as talked about in the assignment description, we need to get these into a specific format, 4x5 or 8x10. So our crop here is going to be quite useful. So I have my screenshot pulled up that I took of my computer screen, and I also have my JPEG, which I exported from Lightroom with all of my modifications. And you'll see they both look quite different, and so it will be interesting to see this comparison of having them both side by side, similar to how I had them up in the window. So the first thing I want to do is make a crop version of each of these with the appropriate ratio. So let's start with Google's image. I'm going to grab that crop tool right here, or I can hit C and that will also pull it up. And what I want to do is come up to my ratio. Right now it's set to 16:9, which is the standard high definition ratio, also very useful for some things, but I need a 4x5 or 8x10 ratio for this project. So I'm going to lose some of the area on the side there. And I know that I photographed this in a landscape style, so I'm actually going to switch this to be 5x4. Cool. So this is definitely going to be more of my ratio. Now in my Google image, I have a little bit of this railing here in the front, which is not included in the picture that I took. So what I'm going to do to get this even a little bit tighter is pull this in so I don't have the railing right up here. Great. And then I'm going to pull this over. I might lose some of the buildings there, but that's okay. So ultimately, I just need the image from Google. Then I'll hit enter, and I should have a crop version of that image. First thing I'm going to do, because I want this to be a non-destructive edit, is I'm going to save this as a different JPEG. So I'll hit File, Save As. I'm going to save it in that same folder so I know where it is, and I'm going to call this Edit in all caps, Edit Crop, Google Screenshot 1, since you'll be dealing with a series of images, and I'm going to save this as a JPEG. And click Save. After I do that, I want to make sure that my quality is set to 12 or maximum and large file. So I'll hit OK. And that should have saved another version of that image in my drive, in which right now for me is on my desktop. Yep, I have that edit crop right in there as a JPEG. So that's great. Now I'm going to come over and do the same thing, since I know I'm going to make a crop on my image here. I'm going to hit that crop tab again. I want it to be 5x4 I want it that instead of 4x5 because I'm going to keep that landscape mode. I'm going to position it just like that. And because I want this to be its own image, I'm going to go ahead again, non-destructively, hit File, Save As. And I'm going to save this as Edit, Crop, and then I can keep my same image name. However, I exported it from Lightroom, which hopefully you already used a name that is fitting for the project. And then I'll hit Save. Quality 12 or maximum, that's great. I'm going to hit OK. The next thing I want to do is figure out how big my images actually are. So I'm going to go back to my regular arrow and go to image size. And I can find out that if it looks like my resolution on this screenshot is at 144. I'm going to switch this over to inches so I have a little bit better idea. But the Google screen cap image, it's totally okay with me if my resolution isn't at 300. I'm going to see where this lands, but I already know that this might be a little bit too big. So, you know, it might be worth it if I change the resolution to something that matches my original photo. So let's see what this one is, just for a point of comparison. It is at 300, and it looks like my width is at 14.45 inches by 11.56 inches, which is pretty massive in size, which is super cool. I'm going to hit OK and see where that puts me if I do change my screenshot to be at that same size. So we go to image size, resolution. Let's change this to 300. Uncheck resample. So my width goes down to 8x7. Totally fine. Kind of closer to 9. So maybe let's see if we can. Nope. Resolution shifting. You might run into this as well. Resolution is at 300. Let's hit resample. Let's definitely get this to 9. 9x7. We'll make sure that we have our width set to 9 on the other image and resolution set to 300 as well. So that's going to mean that my final image output for this is at least 18 inches by 7, because the width, we're going to be putting them next to each other. So I'll probably set my width of my canvas where I copy and place these in as new layers, probably as 20 inches long. And that's actually what it would look like if I decided to print it out from a high resolution inkjet printer, which is great. So I'll hit OK here, and that changes it a little bit. And come back over here, let's get that to be the exact same image size. So we'll go to image size. I'm already set to 300 resolution. I'm going to change the width to 9, see what happens. Great, that means height goes down to 7.2, just making this a tiny bit smaller. I'll hit OK. Great. And now I know that I need that new canvas where I can contain both my image as well as my reference image. So we'll go to File, New. And again, we're going to set this up. We want resolution to be at 300. This is going to be Contag JaNae _ U versus Google 1. And we'll set the width to be at 20. And we know that these are each 7 inches tall. So let's make height set to 9. That'll give us approximately the same amount of space around. And I'll hit Create. Background again is set to white, which helps me to actually be able to see where I'm placing things. Then we'll come over to the Google image. We'll put this one on the left. I'm going to grab this rectangular marquee tool and drag it over my whole image. Go to Command C or Command Copy, or if you're working on a PC, Control C. And then I'll come over to my new canvas here and go to Command V or Control V if you're on a PC. And then I can move this over pretty easily. And I'll get these lined up a little bit better once I get my other image in there. Here we go. So we're back on the image that I took. We're going to drag that rectangular marquee over, hit Command C to copy, and then Command V to paste. And I'm still feeling like it might be a little bit big as far as my canvas size here and getting these sort of centered. I do appreciate that we have these awesome alignment tools, which are being super useful, so I can at least get it squared out to be pretty close. Awesome. But if I did want to, eliminate some of the framing around the outside, I can always go to Image, Canvas Size, and change how large that canvas is. So if I change the width to be a little bit less, let's say 19 inches, it's going to anchor everything in. If I just need to take off from one side or another, I can always anchor it so it only cuts from the left or only cuts from the right. But my images are pretty close here, so I'm just going to have it be an overall width reduction. And, I could probably take one off the height as well. We'll make that 8. And hit proceed. And there we go. That's a little bit tighter. It's kind of up to you how you'd like this to be framed or how much white space you'd like around the outside. But I think leaving some is really nice and kind of gives that frame to the picture. So if you do print it out in the future, you have a lot of space to actually make those cuts. So we definitely want some space between the images and, of course, in the middle here of this diptych. Once I've arranged both of my images, both the Google version of the same building and then my version of the building, we will go to File, Save As, and I already have it set to U versus Google 1 as a Photoshop document. That's great. We need that. So I'll hit Save so I can come back to it at any given time. And then I'm going to save it as a JPEG. So File, Save As, Format, JPEG, just a regular JPEG, and hit Save. Again, we're going to want to make sure that that quality slider is all the way up to maximum at 12, and then hit OK. And now, when I go over to my folder here, I should have a JPEG version of my piece. And that looks great, and that's what we're looking for. For the famous portraits, if you're still feeling uncomfortable in Photoshop and you'd like to arrange them in Google Slides, just make sure that your image and the famous portrait that you've chosen are roughly the same size, just like the class examples, so that you have a direct one-to-one comparison between the two images. So I hope that helps everyone, and let me know if you run into any roadblocks. I'm totally happy to help.